I want to thank you all for being here. Here we are again. It was just a few short months ago that we were doing this for the primaries. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. I have a problem with the microphone. You're loud enough. I am. So if that happens again, I'm just going to start talking. Before I turn this over to our moderator tonight, I just want to express a few thank yous. First of all, to all of the people from the League of Women Voters who have worked very hard to bring this forum tonight, particularly Doug Bianchi there. And I also want to thank media representatives who are always willing to come out and be with us. Yes. Meanwhile, everybody can hear me okay, right? You can hear me? What? Okay, this is going to be a fun night. So anyway, our media representatives, thank you so much. You always come out. Appreciate it very much.
Test.
I'll be very dainty.
Oops.
I think it's dead battery is probably what it is.
My determination is it's a dead battery.
Okay, with all of this technological wonder that's going on, I do want to remind you also, please turn off your cell phones because that would be helpful. Want to also, of course, thank our candidates very much for coming out. I know that they've done a few of these, so we always appreciate it when they're willing to come out yet one more time. And I particularly want to thank NCTV and KVMR. NCTV is broadcasting live tonight and then making this forum available through YouTube. And we will be able to go and look at it, and you can let your friends and neighbors know that they can go and look at it. We will be bringing that onto our League of Women Voters website. Okay, sorry, I just got a little sidetracked there with that note. It's really important that everybody in Nevada County has accessibility to listen and hear these candidates. And NCTV broadcasting this, and also KVMR is broadcasting it live as well. And it allows everybody in Nevada County to listen to our candidates. So it's really important that we support these organizations. And I actually have a little something out there on the table which explains all of the various things that you can find on the League of Women Voters website. But also what it has on it are links where you can go and support both NCTV and KVMR for allowing this broadcast to go out to the greater community. So thank you to both of them. Voting, of course, League of Women Voters is all about voting rights and making sure that voters are educated. And as such, we have many tools on our website that are really important. And I encourage you to pick up this blue piece of paper on our table out there when you leave. Because if you go to our website, you can click a button to register to vote. You can click a button to check your registration status, make sure that all of your information is correct. You can click a button on Voter's Choice to view your ballot and to look at candidate statements. This is really important. It's a new tool that's come out between the League of Women Voters and MapLight. And what it allows you to do is to type in your address, and then you are able to pull up your ballot. And hopefully the candidates have all submitted their own statements, which are unedited statements, so you can find out a little bit more about them. It is a fabulous voting tool. And we are really trying to push it in Nevada County, so we're trying to get all of our candidates on board with submitting their statements and encouraging you to go and look at it. This is about Voter's Edge, important voting tool. Take a look at that. This is about the Voter's Choice Act. Take a look at that. We've been through one cycle with our new way of voting. It was very successful. Pick that up if you want to know a little bit more about it. And on that note, I'd just say that next week, we have two forums. We have the Grass Valley City Council, And that is not at this venue. That is going to be at the City Council, the Grass Valley City Hall. That also is going to be broadcast with NCTV and KVMR. That's Wednesday night. Thursday night, we are going to have the... Thank you. We're going to have the Sheriff's Forum here on Thursday night. And then the following Thursday night, we are going to present the pros and cons of all of the ballot measures, of which there are many. And I know that a lot of people are always, feel just overwhelmed by that. But the League of Women Voters takes and breaks them down and gives an unbiased pro and con of each one. That's also going to be broadcast. So we're really trying to educate all the voters in our community. Please spread the word that the League of Women Voters has lots of resources on their website and take advantage of them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, our League of Women Voters member, Stephen Munkelt.
Thank you, Dennis. And I'm going to try and edge my way up to the microphone since the stick doesn't seem to be working. Okay. So I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, and you probably know this drill as well as I do. But the League of Women Voters was established after women won the vote, after decades of work toward that goal in the United States, and was founded with a principle of promoting public education and the exercise of our franchise. And that has evolved today to effort nationwide for all local leagues to try and present public education forums with people who are running for office in local jurisdictions and in national jurisdictions as well. Tonight we have candidates who are competitors for the Division I seat of Nevada Irrigation. Did I get that wrong? Is it Division II and you're Division I? Okay, I got it backwards. Candidates who are running for the Division II Nevada Irrigation District seat, and Ricky Heck, who's the candidate for Division I. We asked the people attending the forum to please withhold your approval or disapproval of any candidate or answer. In other words, no applause, no boos. Basically, we're just listening to the information and the positions that the candidates are stating. And at the end, we'll give you an opportunity to applaud or exercise that voice of your own. The candidates will each have a 2-minute opening statement, a 2-minute closing statement. There will also be questions. Some of the questions are from the audience. Some of the questions will be from our panel of media experts from our local media. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer an individual question. We have timekeepers who get to hold up a 30 seconds to go sign and a time up sign, which hopefully will keep everybody on track. And then when a candidate feels a real need to give a quick rebuttal to something that they feel was misstated or inappropriate, we allow up to 1 minute for a rebuttal. Now the media dignitaries who are going to be providing some of the questions tonight are Paul Emery from KVMR, probably the dean of Nevada County News at this point in his life. we have Paul Haas from KNCO. We have Liz Keller from the Union, and we have Pascal Fusolder from Ubinet. So we'll be getting to them shortly. Excuse me. But because we don't have 2 candidates for Division I, Ricky Heck is going to give a statement tonight and then not participate in the question and answers, which will be directed to Mr. Herring and Mr. Bierweg. So, Ricky, would you like to go ahead?
Great, thank you. So thank you first to the League of Women Voters and Janice and Doug and all the volunteers who put this together. These forums are so important, and I am really delighted to be here. I wanted to give you a brief summary about me, why I am here, and how I got here. I thought the League had asked me, for the benefit of the audience, to please participate, but because I am already the director-elect, I think technically, I didn't want to take time away from these folks. So the compromise was I was going to make a statement, tell you a little bit about me so that you're informed, and then I'm going to exit. Okay, so I retired from my business career about 2 years ago, and I began looking for an opportunity to use my skills and my 30 years of business to give back to this community, which I have lived and worked in here for almost 40 years. I was appointed to serve as the planning commissioner for the County of Nevada, and I currently serve in that position in District 1. That position I will be resigning when I take, sometime between now and when I take the oath of office at NID. I began attending these NID meetings about 18 months ago because I felt I could do more than simply serve as a planning commissioner. I quickly saw that my business skills, my land use experience could be an asset to NID. And so I decided to run for the Division 1 seat currently held by Nancy Weber. I do have to ask, yeah, they asked me to do 5 minutes. Okay, we have a timing issue here. So I've had the very good fortune and quite frankly the honor to have run unopposed, and I will be taking the oath of office in early December. And I'm so ready to go to work at NID. I'm excited about that. So I wanted to let you all know that as I've been walking around and talking to folks and campaigning in the last, year and a half, it's been surprising to me to find out how many folks I have learned who do not understand the importance of the Nevada Irrigation District. They don't understand where their water comes from, many of them. Some of them don't care as long as it comes through the tap. And some of them do not understand how important it is for us as a region to protect our water. Well, I care deeply, and I have learned in the last 18 months that that care has gotten larger. I care deeply about our water and the health of our watershed. And I also have learned that I care greatly about the agricultural community who uses 90% of NID's water deliveries. I didn't know that when I began, but they do. So they're the biggest user, and they're one of our more important users. During the last 4 months, I visited every farm and most every ranch in the division that I will be representing. I came to appreciate the hard work, the diversity and the contribution that ag makes to our community and our region, and the role that NID plays in ag. I didn't know any of that before, but I do now. I also learned about the hardworking men and women of NID who keep our water flowing. Never mind the weather, the conditions, or anything. That water flows, come snow or rain. They are a remarkable group of hardworking folks, and I've come to deeply respect them, and I want to be on the board to help support those employees. The other thing I learned about NID that I want to share with you is that they employ over 200 people. So they're really an economic driver in our community and a major employer. They provide great jobs with benefits and pay well for most, I think, if not all, of those 200 people. And we're really fortunate to have them in our backyard with our local control. Not many people can say that their water district is right at home. We have that. So make no mistake, this election is critical, okay? It is critical to the future of our watershed. It is critical to our local water priorities, and voters will have a choice in this election. They will choose the status quo, or they will choose innovation, conservation, and strategies to address the changing climate and the new water laws from the state level. Whether you are in the boundaries of NID or not, the decisions that that board makes will impact you. As your director, I will depend on integrity, transparency, open processes, community participation, and strong fiscal oversight to help me make sound decisions. I have a lot more to say about my priorities in NID, but I wanted to minimize my time so that the focus can be on these two gentlemen who are competing for the job to serve you in Division 2. I'll be available to answer questions. I thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your interest in NID. And please engage in this important election, and most importantly, please vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we take the opening statements, let me just remind everybody that the way the audience gets to participate in questions for this forum is to fill out a little written statement on a card. And we have people, if you hold up a card or hold up a hand, we have people who come around and grab those so they can be sorted and handed up to me. Okay. Without further ado, Mr. Herring, would you like to give an opening statement?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Stephen, for serving as the moderator for this event, and thanks to the League. So I'm Bruce Herring. My wife Sally and I have lived in Nevada County for 30 years. We've been NID, both treated and raw water customers, since 1990. We are blessed with raising two extraordinary daughters in this community who are now young adults, seeking their fame and fortune elsewhere. So the path that led me to be sitting here in front of you tonight to run for this position began 40 years ago. I became a whitewater rafting guide. And it was a lot of fun, but I also learned a great deal. I learned, of course, how water works. I learned about the concept of watershed. And I also learned a great deal about dams, because most of the stretches that you run are controlled. So I learned about them from just below, the releases from the reservoirs, and as you come into them from below. More recently, I spent a dozen years at Bittney Prep High School, formerly known as Bittney Springs, where I taught government and economics, and I served for 4 years as the principal of the school. I became the principal in 2009 in the height of the Great Recession, and I was told I had to cut 15% out of the budget I had just inherited. And for the next 3 years, the state was continuing to cut funds to education. So out of my 5 years, 5 budgets that I created, 3 of them were tough. But I managed to balance the budget, enlarge the program, and increase enrollment. I have 3 priorities for doing this. One is sound fiscal management. The other one is just open communications. And the third is a healthy watershed from top to bottom. And I'm sure you'll be hearing more about all 3 of those priorities as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Beerwagon.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. Thank you to the League and to all of you for coming tonight and hearing us out. I am Chris Beerwagon, 4th generation farmer, farming land that's been in our family for 116 years. In 1925, after the ditches were dug around Nevada County, water came to Chicago Park. My grandfather cried when he saw water flowing on the land. And in fact, pear production increased by 3,000% with the addition of irrigation water. Then my father, Ernie Beerwagon, after a long career as an orchardist, served 26 years as a board member of NID. It is because of this legacy and my own interest in water, the distribution of water and power production, and the need for it to water our dry land, that I have a keen interest in serving on NID. Through my work serving on NID's Weed Abatement Advisory Committee, their Water Rate Study Committee, and their, their Drought Hardship Committee, I have learned of the many challenges that face the district and how complex the decisions are that are to be made. I feel that it is important that we have someone that represents production agriculture to be on the board. As we've heard, that 80 to 90% of the water goes to agriculture, so it's a big thing. While we are living in uncertain and changing water supply times, I feel that it's important that the district be on the forefront to tackling these challenges. As we know, the variations that we experience in our climate are real, and they need to be addressed. The district needs, while increasing our storage capacity is important, it's also important that we continue to finish the water rate study and move on into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll do the first question as an audience question, and it will go to you, Mr. Beerwagon, okay. And you have 1.5 minutes. This person anticipates there will be plenty of discussion about Centennial Dam, and their question is, what are the other key issues for the district, and what are your views on those issues?
The key issues in addition to the dam. So I strongly believe that business as usual for maintaining the integrity and the security and the adequacy of our water supply is very important. And we are faced with increasing demands on that water supply, both from the federal government and from the state water board, who have determined that we should be releasing water down the rivers to supply, to take care of the delta. And so I think that's the paramount issue is that one, the looming taking of our water that I will oppose vehemently.
Thank you. And Mr. Herring.
Well, like I said, back to my priorities, the three issues that are paramount are fiscal responsibility, communications, and a healthy watershed. And let me just, you'll hear a little bit more. There's a glaring example of the irresponsibility of the current board and the status quo is you will hear that NID will be enacting an across-the-board rate increase here before the end of the year. And in my view, this is something that could have been prevented. It's a structural problem that has been known for decades, and yet the current board has sort of just sat on their hands and not really addressed it. It's normal to have rate increases, but to have a significant rate increase of at least, say, 6 to 8% annually for 5 years on top of already having a 6% increase for the previous 6 is to me, it means that someone was asleep at the wheel. And the other thing, like I mentioned, is the NID service area is, and we are fortunate here that our service area goes from the Sierra Crest all the way to the valley floor. And so there's so many things we can do to ensure the health of the watershed. And I also believe that there's just a great backlog of deferred maintenance that needs to be addressed in a more aggressive manner. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Emery, are you ready for our first media panel question?
I am. Well, so far, NID, and this is as of October of last year, NID has spent, around $12 million on the development of the Centennial Dam project. Now, there have been other projects that were proposed for various parts of the Yuba River. Back, I think Sutter had a plan. They wanted to put a dam on the Yuba at some point. Ended up costing them, I think, $30, maybe $40 million. And the project was not approved and it never happened. So my question is, we've already spent $12 million. How much more money would you personally support being spent developing the Centennial Dam project? And would you support rate increases to pay for this expenditure?
And Mr. Herring, you're first with that one.
So this speaks to the issue I was just talking about is we're about to see a dramatic across-the-board rate increase. And the $13 million spent on a project that may or may not ever happen, and I believe may or may not even be necessary, just exacerbates the concept of fiscal irresponsibility that we see with the status quo. So without spending that money, it's entirely possible the rate increase could have been far less onerous. In addition, by half of that $13 million has been spent in buying real property in the inundation zone of Centennial, in both Placer and Nevada County. And by doing so, NID has essentially broken the real estate market. I mean, anyone over there, no one's going to buy over there right now. And the only willing seller is NID itself, besides the people, who have already had a chance to move on. So it seems to me the $13 million spent so far, and actually there's $4 million budgeted for next year and $4 million budgeted for 2020 as we speak. That's another $8 million. That money could possibly have instead been spent to lessen the impact of the water rate increase that we're all going to see.
Thank you. Mr. Bierwagen.
So I think some historical facts are appropriate this time concerning what was the Parker Dam site, now called Centennial Dam, and it's a very historic evolution that's happened in the district, and it gets us to where we are today. It isn't just that the NID has decided they're going to build a dam out there and they went out and started buying property. That's a misnomer. What happened is they identified the site in the 1920s. They bought the Parker Ranch at that time, or during that time, and applied for the water rights at the same time. What happened is they could not afford to build a dam at that time, and it has been in limbo since that time. Currently, NID owns 60% of the land in the flood zone, and the little known fact is that they haven't gone out there to buy land. They have been approached by landowners who see the handwriting on the wall. This is a very appropriate place to build a dam. It holds a lot of water, and it'll benefit the district, not only the district, but all of California, or has the potential to. So while it is a large expense each year, I think it's appropriate that they've been doing that. And I don't know whether it would require rate increase to do that, but it certainly is a benefit to the district.
Thank you. And now I have an audience question. Yes, you want to rebut?
I just want to add that the state dismissed the Parker Reservoir twice, in the 20s and in the 60s, because it wasn't a viable project. And so an NID abandoned it, the application at that point, in order to build Rollins Reservoir. And so it's been dismissed twice before.
Thank you. So we have an audience question, and Mr. Beerwagen, you get to go first on this one. Sort of a two-part question, really. Will the release dates for use of Roundup for weed abatement be available to the public before it's applied? And should NID stop using Roundup?
So as I stated, I've been on the Weed Abatement Advisory Committee this year, started a new program, entirely new and unique in the state, of being in the forefront of examining alternative uses for chemicals for two reasons. One being the Roundup controversy, the other being the chemicals that are applied in the water for weed and algae and aquatic weed control. And so as we know, this is a very difficult issue. I happen to be an organic farmer and a conventional farmer. I've used both conventional and biological pesticides. And so I have some background in what it takes to control weeds. I think the question was about Roundup. What was the
second part? Was should the district stop using that product?
At this time, the district is, okay, if it was outlawed, then they will have to stop using it. It has not been outlawed, and in fact is still quite popular, and happens to be the cheapest product available for controlling weeds and the most effective. So if it is outlawed, then the district faces a huge expense. At this moment in time, it's estimated they would have to hire 30 people just to control the weeds, because there are no effective biological herbicides to kill weeds.
Thank you. And Mr. Herring, it's sort of the two-parter with will the release of or use of Roundup be available to the public, and should we stop using that product?
Well, first of all, I fully support the program they have right now in this vegetation management program, attempting to find solutions and alternatives to not only the use of Roundup, but also maybe alternatives to some of the algicides. So what I would like to see, though, is the process just continue, but maybe open it up a little more for public input. And I do agree that that's the reason that NID uses it, is because it works and it's the least expensive. However, I think we need to come to grips with the fact that it is a known carcinogen, and I believe there should be a viable alternative.
Thank you. And let's go for our second media question from Paul Haas at KNCO.
Good evening, gentlemen, and I want to thank you for running for office, because it's a challenge when you put yourself out there. And I work with high school students on a daily basis, and I've asked this question of other races in the past. Why is it important for our 18-year-olds to vote in this election, and specifically in regards to the NID race? And how would you promote yourself, or the message you would send to a high school student, and your strengths in regards to that?
That you would be first for that, Mr. Herring.
Right. My first response to that is, as a high school government and economics teacher, I brought out the chart of the entire drum Spalding system and made sure that these were seniors in high school, that they knew exactly where their water came from, and the intricate diversions that bring water all the way from the middle Yuba to the south to Deer Creek to Bear River. And so I think I was fairly successful, and I think they were fairly stunned to know that that water came from all that far away. So I would start with there, that, hey, this is, you need to find out where your water is coming from. But beyond that, I mean, the 18-year-olds at this point are still going to be here in the year 2100, you know, and most of the rest of us in this room are not. And so this is all about their future, you know, they're growing up, having children, and their grandchildren. And so it's important to have a clear vision going forward of how we're going to meet these challenges. And I think I have a greater, broader picture of how we can accomplish that instead of just standing still.
Mr. Beerwagen.
So I think it's important that we target, that we encourage voting by young people of all, but for all races and for all issues, okay? But beyond that, the general public needs to be hearing the same thing that we're talking to 18-year-olds about. I don't think there's a differentiation between any voter or a young one. Certainly encouraging young people to start voting in general is probably going to be an uphill battle at this age. But as Mr. Herring has pointed out, the importance of water, it's hugely important to agriculture first, but to all of us, not first, but to all of us all the time. And so from that standpoint, I think it would be beneficial to have some in civics classes and to have opportunity to learn about where our water comes from, just like we need to learn where our food comes from. We need to learn how much water it takes to grow a pound of food. And I think that would be an important thing to teach in schools.
And going back to an audience question, this is first for you, Mr. Beerwagen. Given that much older infrastructure is needing reinvestment, such as Isabella Dam, Calaveras Dam, Oroville, various levees, does it really make financial sense to build a new dam?
As far as I'm aware, that the dam situation in Nevada County is, no pun intended, is in pretty good shape and doesn't fall in those categories, but I'm not aware of specific details with the dam inspection. However, I do support the feasibility, the viability of building the dam for the future, at least continuing to go in that direction because of the challenges that we face in water shortage, not only in Placer, Nevada County, but all of California. We are all in this together in the state, and the state desperately needs water. They would be willing to buy water, and it's been shown that we can, I believe it can be shown that we can afford to pay for the dam just as we paid for the Yuba Bear project starting in 1960 when the district was nearly bankrupt. They actually saved their bacon because they built that project, and it was extremely expensive at that time. But over the course of 50 years, paid it off, and now it's paying back by the production of power and the water supply that we have. So I think it's fiscally for the long term. We're not talking about building the dam next year or paying for it next year. We're talking about the long-term need and viability. So I think it's fiscally sound.
Thank you. Mr. Herron.
I agree that the present system is amazing and phenomenal, and it works very well. And I also agree that there is none of the dams are in danger, are about to fall apart or anything like that. But as I mentioned, there is a great deal of deferred maintenance. Some of the old canals, leak badly. It seems like the South Yuba Canal falls apart every year. I think a good portion of it is made out of wood. I think it stems from the 19th century. So to me, an aggressive attack on deferred maintenance is extremely important. And there's also another problem here that gets worse and worse as time goes on, that is sedimentation into the reservoirs. There is a great deal of sediment in both Rollins and Combie, and NID is addressing that to a certain extent. I think we can do more. And this goes back to my comment on a healthy watershed. It's a healthy watershed with enhancement of both the forests and the meadows in the upper watershed will actually lead to a decrease in sedimentation. And not only that, it will also lead to a slight decrease in the danger of a catastrophic fire in our upper watershed. A catastrophic fire in our upper watershed would just put so much sediment and debris in our reservoirs. It would cost as much as Centennial to clean them up, most likely. So we need to address all those problems.
Thank you. And then from the media, Liz Keller at the Union. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. It may be sort of an obvious question, but a two-part question. Is a dam the best way to safeguard Nevada County's water supply? And if not, what other viable alternatives should the district be exploring?
That would go to you first, Mr.
Okay, I like the way you put that, because I am, myself have been saying what we need to do here is step back and ask the right questions. Clearly, we know that there's reduced Sierra snowpack, and precipitation will probably be about the same, but it will come more as rain. And so the question is does that present a long-term supply problem? If so, is Centennial the best solution? So we need to answer those questions, and that's part of what the Raw Water Master Plan is all about. The next couple of years, we're going to be answering some of those questions. But there are a whole slew of alternatives that gets us to just about the same amount of water as Centennial would provide. And each one of those alternatives will also have a close look during the Raw Water Master Plan update. And so we don't really know for sure, but some of the things, again, that we could do is healthy watershed, reduce sedimentation in reservoirs, more dredging of the reservoirs. And there's so many things that we don't even think about that are small, like capturing rainwater, greater use of gray water. And we need to think even beyond the box in a little more creative way that we haven't even thought of yet. One thing is, why do we use expensive treated water to transport our solid waste a long ways? That's a long-term situation to think about. And also, why can't new developments be required to have their own water recycling plant and recycle water just within their own boundaries? Thank you.
And Mr. Beerwagen.
Okay, so would you repeat the question, please? The question about I'm sorry.
I think if I can remember my own question, is the dam the best way to safeguard our water supply? And if not, what other alternatives can the district explore? Okay,
so safeguarding is one thing. Ensuring a adequate supply for the future, I think, is another thing. I think that safeguarding the current, we are in a fairly safe state as long as the water rights remain from the state saying we're going to take water rights away. That would be an issue that could come up. Otherwise, our supply is secure, it is safe. As far as developing new water and new sources, I currently support as I've already stated, the moving forward with the dam, because the alternatives, including meadow restoration and forest restoration, while those are ideas that we all enjoy, they don't produce very much water. And it's been shown that the meadow restoration projects that are going on are expensive, and they only produce 5 to 10 acre feet of water. So while they are environmentally attractive, I agree with them. They are expensive, and new technologies are. Somebody has to pay for those the same way. And what regulation is going to cause a person to put in rainwater catching and gray water recycling? Okay, and that would be a huge issue that would have to be tackled not just at the water district, but in the county at the county level or something like that, building department level. So I think that for the current future, the immediate future, water, and that's what we're going to need.
Thank you. And returning to an audience question, and Mr. Beerwagen, you'll be first for this one. If elected, what changes would you make to NID's integrated vegetation management program and working group?
Okay, as already stated about that, that's going to be an ongoing science project. Okay, literally, it's a very naughty one, and it's at this point, I don't believe there's. Once again, it always boils down to dollars and cents, and how are we going to fund new innovative ideas? Any innovative idea or new pesticide that comes along costs a lot more money. I've been there through many years of losing pesticides and having to buy the new alternative, and they are expensive. They're always more expensive, and there's more regulation that goes along with them, and they are usually not as effective as the last one. So this is a difficult issue at this time until it is proven, and it hasn't been proven by all of scientific community does not agree on that Roundup is carcinogenic. Until that happens, I would not propose any changes except continuing the research into the alternatives.
Thank you. Mr. Herring.
Well, I believe we've already addressed this to a certain extent in a previous question, but I would repeat that I fully support the continuation of this process. I mean, there's a committee working on it. There's community experts working on it. That's exactly what NID needs to do. So we need to have the process play out. But also, like I said, I think the process needs to be more open in the light of day and move forward as rapidly as possible. Even though glyphosate is not specifically illegal at this point, it is true that the state of California has deemed it to be a carcinogen. And so that should be of great concern to most people. I mean, some people shrug that off, and many people that I talk to, it's probably one of the most pressing issues they have going forward. And so I tell them the same thing I'm telling you now. Let's move the process forward. Let's find a viable alternative as quickly and as in the least expensive way that we can.
Thank you. And then from the media, our fourth contributor is Pascal from UBNet.
Good evening. Speaking of science, HDR, the consultant that was selected for the Raw Water Master Plan, has in their scope of work always supply assumptions such as climate change impacts will be based on best available data and estimates from documented sources. Your opinion on climate change, please.
Well, clearly, NID itself, has, in their first reasoning of why Centennial was necessary, decided we need it to combat climate change. So there's no question, as I stated earlier, that the Sierra snowpack seems to be shrinking, and we're going to have greater variation in rain from year to year. What we need, I don't know what HDR is going to do here, but what we need is a hydrologic and climate model that is specific to the Yuba Bear watershed, you know, the NID service area. A study done 4 or 5 years ago that takes into account the entire Sierra Nevada just will not do because there's huge variations between the South, Central, and Northern Sierra Nevada, or a climate change model that takes into account the entire Western United States. What we need is a model specific to our watershed. Our watershed will be affected by climate change differently than the American River watershed, and dramatically different from farther south, for instance, say the Kings River watershed. So we need to look at exactly what's going on here and follow the science.
Thank you. Mr. Beerwagen.
So the effects of climate change are real and obvious. I personally don't think we've had enough experience to say emphatically that we are entering into a totally new phase as experienced in the winter of 2017 or the 2016, where we had a typical year that I experienced all the years I was growing up. So I think, however, we would be remiss in ignoring the situation. And so going forward, once again, if that model continues, then we will see less snowpack and more runoff. And in fact, the amount of runoff in a wet year is equivalent to filling on the Bear River is equivalent to filling 6 Centennial dams. So there's going to be a lot of water, as we saw this past year, going down the river. And so capturing that would be a logical step, in my opinion. So I do think we have to be proactive in modeling and watching the model to see what happens at the outset, but also cautious that it may not be a lifetime change that's happening.
Thank you. And now, audience question, and you'll be first up on this one. What is your feeling about the possibility of inundating the landscape that has been the home, cultural center, and burial grounds of local Nisenan people?
Okay, is any, the idea that we're just going out willy-nilly and doing these things is not true. Anytime man uses the environment, there is a cost, and that includes burial grounds or anybody's recreation or timberland or house site, and these are things that I don't take lightly. However, for the public good and for the need of the district, I believe that this would be considered a necessity and therefore would have to be done. There again, not taking it lightly and not abusing or not just bulldozing over people's lands, but taking mitigation steps and recognizing them and then doing something about them would be appropriate for the general good of the whole population.
Thank you. Mr. Herring.
As a project in my economics classes, I always had the students do a cost-benefit analysis of the project of their choice. And to me, and I try to encourage them to look at costs other than just economic costs. And I have no doubt that and clearly in the finances alone, that most of my students would find that the benefits are here and the costs are here, just financially. But there are a great many human and cultural costs as well, and environmental costs. And so not only for the people who have called that place home for several thousand years, which is a very serious thing. They take it very seriously as their home. But also the people who have bought property there in the last 50, 60, 80 years and are faced with eminent domain. Eminent domain is a serious thing, and we should all be very careful about how we use that. I may be wrong, but I think the last time eminent domain was used around here is when we built the freeway. So it's a big deal. So there are huge cultural sites, and I've met Clyde Prout, the chair of the Colfax, Nisenan folks, and I met a number of people who would be forced to move, and their hearts are like broken. I mean, we just can't discount any of that.
Thank you. And that would take us back to Paul Emery.
Yeah, I kind of like a yes or no answer to this and with an explanation. Do you or don't you support rate increases for the development costs of the Centennial Dam?
That would be for you first, Mr. Herring.
Absolutely not. And in fact, once again, this is just a huge example of fiscal mismanagement of the highest order. The reason for the rate increases is not just developed in the last couple of years. It's not just because of spending money on Centennial. This is a structural problem that has been known by the board for more than a decade. And here it is in a nutshell. The fact remains that the revenues generated from the sale of water do not cover the cost of operations. I think that's a bad business model. There might have been a reason to do it in the past to subsidize and keep water rates low for agricultural people. But what has happened is, as a result of that, every year they have to subsidize the cost of operations of water because the sales don't cover it. And they do that by borrowing from the reserves, and they do that by borrowing money from revenues from the hydroelectric department. This is unsustainable. It's those two things, in addition to the $13 million spent on Centennial, you people are going to be surprised at the significance of this rate increase. And I think so. It's more than that, Paul. It's a structural problem that needs to be addressed. The cost of operations must be met by water revenues. That's just simple business sense.
Thank
the
you,
question
Mr.
was-
Beerwagen.
Oh, sorry.
Want the question reread?
No, I got the question. Thank you.
Okay.
So the question was yes or no answer? Yes. And the justification for that is we have to pay for what we feel we need. Up to this point, it's true. NID has, including the whole time my father was on the board, they worked hard to keep water rates down. And it's true today that that power subsidizes water. I see nothing wrong with that. It's what would we do with the money? Where would the money go? Would it just go back to the consumer or the ratepayer? So it's a package deal that we operate, and the benefit is we have adequate water, and the ratepayers have had to pay for the whole system since the beginning. They have to pay in order to receive water. That's a fact. And it's true that the rates are going to have to go up, whether we build Centennial or not, and they're going to have to go up fairly substantially, I believe, because of the facts that have been pointed out already. So the answer is yes, to continue to provide adequate supply, and as a matter of fact, that water is highly valuable in other parts of the state.
Thank you. Yes.
I just want to add to Chris's question of where would that money go if the cost of maintenance and operations was actually covered by the revenue generated by water sales, which it absolutely should. That water would go to work down the long list of deferred maintenance. It would go to increase budget for dredging reservoirs and removing the sedimentation that is already in there, and all number of things in the operations department that otherwise, need to borrow money for. And so there's all kinds of ways to spend that money in a much more fiscally responsible way, and one that makes much more business sense.
Okay. And then we're going, I think, Mr. Beerwagen, you're first with this next audience question. Water is a commodity. How do we keep our water from the Centennial Dam from being sold out of the county to Roseville and Lincoln? And how can you guarantee that NID water is for our county?
Okay, water is a commodity, and therefore it's a, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, is it my turn? Okay. It is a commodity, and it is a valuable commodity to the rest of the state of California. Currently, we pay extremely low rates per acre foot for water in Nevada County compared to the rest of the state or parts of Southern California that don't have water. I believe that by managing it correctly, we can guarantee that we would meet our own water needs first and then sell water, excess water or surplus water at a huge benefit to the district. And so that would be a delicate balancing act that I think that we could manage as a board to do with that in mind. Not just that we're going to take the water and sell it to Southern California and be left high and dry. That'd be ludicrous for it to think that a board that's managing our water would do that. For what purpose would they serve if we didn't maintain the integrity of our water for our own interest first, and then sell surplus water to create additional revenue for the district?
Thank you. Mr. Herring?
First of all, we could sell surplus water without building an additional reservoir. What you do is, I've spoken to many hydrologists and water engineers, and what they say is just sink that water, put it in the ground. And so we put it in the bank. We put it in the aquifer that's down just outside, just north of Lincoln, sort of in the area where the Bear River and the Feather River come together. It's a viable aquifer sub-basin, the North American sub-basin. And if we're going to sell water out of the district, and we already have done that a little bit, and I think we should do so more. But we should do so with our regional partners in partnership with keeping this aquifer together. In other words, if we're going to sell water, let's first consider, hey, a partnership with Placer County Water Agency, with South Sutter Water District, with anyone down in that area. And we are partners in the management plan of that aquifer with 5 or 6 entities. These are the people we should be working with. And if there is any surplus water, selling it to them. And that includes the agencies I've just mentioned, but also the city of Roseville, the city of Lincoln, I believe Sacramento County, and even a private water company down there. If we're going to sell surplus water, let's make our regional partners whole and not sell it into the greater California system, which, again, is broken because of subsidies.
Thank you. And are we back to Paul Haas? Have I got that right? Okay. And then that's first to you, Mr. Herring.
All right. This question, I guess, is specific about Division 2. And so are there any unique issues to Division 2 that are different from any of the other divisions? If so, what's the biggest issue and how would you address that?
It's to me. So, like many of the other divisions, Division 2 is quite diverse. It includes a great deal of agriculture in the Peardale, Chicago Park area, and other areas, smaller operations, down along Dog Bar. But it also includes a huge segment of the population in the northern part of Alta Sierra that is just entirely treated water customers. And so, without question, I am all for working with our diverse agricultural community. And I think we can work with them to a greater degree than NID does already by, helping them become more and more efficient as time goes on. I've spoken to farmers in the division who tell me, who have asked me, why does NID waste so much water? And I said, well, I don't know. Tell me about it. So it's been an education for me. So there's a huge diversity of ag. Then we have a great ranching and agricultural heritage that Chris is part of. I completely honor that. But there's also all kinds of newer, younger farmers who are trying to just, grow row crops and sell them here and wherever they can. And I think we can just work really well and as best we can with all of them. So again, it's a diverse division.
Thank you. And Mr. Beerwick.
So Bruce is correct that the diversity is quite astounding, the area we serve. To my knowledge, there's no specific issues that loom larger in our division than others because of the geographical diversity of the whole district. Getting water to individual areas and new customers is probably the same in all of the divisions, maybe more so in some than others, but I'm not aware of that. The huge problem with extending treated water is the expense of doing that. And outlying areas that don't have many houses per mile create a real cost burden for doing that. So I would see that is probably more pressing for a lot of the constituents in our area is the extension, especially when wells go dry, to get treated water to new tracts of homes and that sort of area. Certainly the agriculture area has been served for a long time, and there's not a new greater need there than has been in the past.
Thank you. And then for you, Mr. Berwagen, the first up on this question, does protection of our water include perfecting our water rights? And how do you propose to do that?
So perfecting our water rights, I'm not aware of what that exactly entails or means, but I do know that the saying that the state giveth and the state taketh away, that is a reality that we live with when they grant water rights. And so water rights are not absolute or lifetime. We can't bank on that idea. I'm not aware of how you would go about doing that. That would be something I'd have to research. So I'm a fuzzy on that one, but I do know that they are not absolute, but we're tasked with being good stewards of the rights that we have and ensuring that we're doing a good job with them.
Thank you, Mr. Herring.
Well, water rights are very complex in the state of California, and Chris is right that in effect it's the state's water, meaning it's all of our water, and what the state is very concerned with is what is not only the most reasonable, but what is the highest beneficial use. And so NID has, for a relatively small water district, certainly there's a lot that are smaller, and a huge array of water rights, dating all the way back to pre-1914. And so we need to do everything we can to keep those water rights. And in addition, NID has applied for an assignment of additional water rights for unallocated water on the Bear River in order to build Centennial Reservoir. And I fully support going after that additional assignment of water rights. Now keep in mind that won't happen for many years down the road after the Raw Water Master Plan, after all the environmental reviews. Then there'll be a hearing, if it gets that far, before the State Water Resources Control Board. But we should go after those water rights and, like I say, again, use them to put the water in the bank in the North American Sub-Basin Aquifer down in the Lincoln area.
Thank you. And then Liz Keller from the media, you're up for a question.
And I apologize. I stepped out for a little bit, so I don't know. Maybe you guys can answer this. Did anybody ask any questions specific to the Raw Water Master Plan update process?
No.
Okay. So my question would be, obviously, maybe a quick answer about why the Raw Water Master Plan update is important, and what issues do you see with how the board is implementing that process?
That would go first to Mr. Herring.
It's extremely important, and it's something we need to do, and I also believe it's something that should have happened years ago, well before, moving so forward on a project that may or may not ever happen. Classic example of the cart before the horse. Nevertheless, the board just moved forward last week or the week before and hired a facilitator and HDR as part of the technical process. I fully support this process because, like I said earlier, we need to know what's going on. What are the long-term supply issues? What are the long-term demand issues? And like I said before, what is the hydrology of the area? And how is climate change going to affect that? So hopefully, if this is a open and process, the Raw Water Master Plan will answer many of those questions. So we're right at the beginning stages of that. It's probably going to be a 2-year process. There will not be a formal vote by the board to either approve, at the end of the process in 2 years, the board will have several different options on how to proceed. They're called pathways. One of them could be Centennial, one of them could be, something else, and one of them could be a whole basket full of alternatives, or there could be, more than one pathway, it seems to me. So it's 2 years before we even get to that point where the board will vote on how to go forward, and I fully support that.
So Bruce is correct. The process is just starting. It's new to me. I have not been aware of the need for it up to this point, but it's become obvious that it is. And they've adopted a 2-year process, very expensive. Maybe you saw what the cost was going to be, but it's very comprehensive, and therefore I look forward to it answering questions. A huge component of it is bringing all of the stakeholders and the community together to bring technical expertise to the process. So it is in the beginning stages. It's going to be a long process, and I believe will be very beneficial in the long run. And so in the meantime, we do have to continue our own form of planning to meet the current needs. And I look forward to seeing what comes out of that plan.
Thank you, and don't take a deep breath. You get the first answer for the next question, too. I have several versions of this, so let's go with this one and kind of stand for all of them. The estimated price tag for the Centennial Dam I've heard about is around $1 billion, with $600 million for construction, $400 million for interest. If half that amount was invested in upgrading and repairing the existing infrastructure, would that be a better solution for water supply?
Okay, so I had a discussion today about the cost. We hear this. The beginning number was $230 million, I think it was, to build the dam, and now it's $1 billion. And the discrepancy there is, what is the final cost of the dam going to be? And as with any huge construction project, as we know, every street and every road, every bridge that's built has these challenges. And indeed, I'm not aware that I'm not sure that we can say what the cost is going to be. An additional interest charge over a 50-year period of time is quite a fact. Okay, that's the truth. So certainly, if we say it's only going to cost $300 million to build a dam, that may be correct for building the dam, but the overall cost. And so I think we need to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges when we talk about the cost. And so I do not think that today there are more beneficial uses that money could be put to, because they are not been proven that they deliver that amount of water on a river that's already has 9 dams or diversions on it. It's not a free-flowing river. It's a dry stream in the summertime if it didn't have water releases from dams. So I do not know of any other projects that would deliver the kind of water that we're talking about.
Thank you. Mr. Herring.
There's potential here to be just, again, we're years away from this, but potential to be a financial boondoggle. Again, it wouldn't be difficult for a high school senior to realize that the benefits are here and the costs are way up here. And so you would have to sell several buckets full of water all the time out of the district to even generate revenue just to cover the interest. And so the question was, are there other ways to spend that money? And I've already mentioned several. I mean, certainly, fix the leaking infrastructure. Build the reserves back up, for gosh sakes. Stuff happens. I mean, what happens if a transformer blows, or if there is a catastrophic fire and every reservoir is just filled with debris and sediment? We need to have, stay on a firm financial footing. To me, again, the cart before the horse, the district was irresponsible in moving so far forward without really knowing if it was necessary, without really knowing the costs, and it's, in the end, who would be saddled with the cost? That's, we don't know that either.
Thank you. And that brings us back to the irrepressible Pascal for the next question.
Why, thank you. So NID has 27, call it 28,000 customers, and a district that encompasses 287,000 acres. That leaves an awful lot of people in Nevada County, in Western Nevada County, and also in Placer County with no service. Waterline extension, as far as NID goes, is a very complicated and extremely, extremely costly process. So do you have any ideas or options about how the district could actually fulfill its mandate to the people that right now are paying a small portion of their property tax to NID, but are not getting any water and are, frankly, it's not looking good for them?
That's a good question, and I hear that when I talk to people. To their credit, NID has stepped up the extension program, and it is very expensive. But they do offer, more and more help in that. But again, it's slow. I don't really know exactly how we could speed that up too much because just because it is expensive. But there must be a way that we can just get together and solve this problem. I mean, the way that NID has been doing it so far is, if say an area wants to hook up, at least 50%, I might be wrong about that, of the people in that area need to say they're willing to do it and willing to pay for it in order to proceed. And so, but yes, I know a lot of people who would love to have water. I don't know the exact answer, but I think if we put our heads together and work together, we can probably move a little faster in getting water to people who need it and want it.
Thank you. Mr. Beerwagen?
So Bruce is right about this issue, and we've addressed it already this evening, the cost of mainline extensions and why it's so costly. If you go back in history, the reasons for the costs, the reasons that they have regulations, the reasons that they require this large a pipe. And the first issue that comes up is fire flow. And that's mandated, I believe, by the state, or at least by especially insurance agencies, that if you lay a pipeline, then you have to make it big enough to flow 500 gallons a minute, I believe, or up to 1,000. So those pipes and their installation and following the regulations and all that goes into it is hugely expensive, and it is a problem. Ultimately, the person that receives the water has to pay the benefit, and I don't know of any solutions if we start talking about we're going to that everybody has to pay for mainline extensions to a certain area. I'm not sure even how that works currently. And touching on the tax question, historically, everyone pays the tax. Not everyone gets the water. The public benefit has been touted, but also they can only use that money for infrastructure improvement or capital improvement, and so that's what that money is used for, to create new infrastructure.
Thank you. And again, I've got a couple of different versions of this subject, so let's try the combination. Do you agree that to protect Nevada County from urbanization, we need to preserve and protect agriculture? And with the shrinking snowpack, how will you ensure that agriculture has the water it needs?
Okay, the question about
protecting from urbanization was the first part.
Protecting urbanization. Okay, I don't believe this is an issue for our water for discussion about water. However, it is where's the idea coming from that we need to protect from urbanization? Okay, so we're talking about two different things here. The idea of if the general public wants to preserve open space by having farmland, then there has to be a vehicle to do that. Somebody has to pay the bill. The bill always has to be paid. And this notion that we're just going to farm land for open space and the farmer gets to pay the bill is not going to fly. It doesn't fly with me at all. So that's a really tricky issue with farmland and open space and maintaining it. However, if we're tying it together then with the source of water, the amount of water we have, that we go back to the answers that we've already given about changing the way we store water, where we store water, how much we store, because that's what we have to do here.
Thank you. And Mr. Herring.
Well, I think we absolutely need to do everything we can to keep our diverse agricultural communities sustainable, for generations. And we're talking about, let's say just set a target. We want to be sustainable in the year 2100, just 80 years from now. So yes, let's work with our agricultural community at all levels to ensure their viability, work with them to create better efficiencies. They're really good at that. I mean, they know more about it than we do, the people who are on the ground doing this, whether they're doing orchards or row crops or irrigated pasture. They try different things. They know best how to be more efficient. And so to me, it's not a question of, saving that land from urbanization. It's a matter of let's keep our incredible agricultural heritage whole. And I think we have an adequate supply of water to do that and well into the future. And let's just ensure that happens.
Thank you. And Paul Emery, are you teed up for another one?
I'm ready to go. Yeah, we haven't talked at all about marijuana cultivation, and it was about a year ago, August 8th, and the director of the NID, Mr. Scherzinger, Rem Scherzinger, commented that if anybody who grows marijuana indoors was going to have to was going to have to take out a second water connection. And he was very specific about it. And this is a quote: "There is a significant threat to the water system by what's happening in that garage. It doesn't matter what you're growing. If you're growing corn, we're going to sever your connection," quote, unquote. And asked for an estimate, he said that it would cost between $15,000 to $50,000 for the additional connection. Speak to that and give us your opinion of that policy.
I'll be first to you, Mr. Herring.
Well, the first thing we need to remember is that people have been growing cannabis around here for a very long time. And so there's not all of a sudden going to be a run on water if it becomes legal. And so far, there's only a very small handful of people who have jumped through the incredible array of hoops to get to that point. So I don't know if Mr. Scherzinger has walked that statement back. I know he does respect and has met with people from the Cannabis Alliance. I believe the Cannabis Alliance is going to be part of the Raw Water Master Plan stakeholder group. If they're not, they certainly should be. I think essentially they are people who are business people and essentially farmers who want to go legitimate. And so, of course, there's always going to be, people on the black market still. But the total amount of water is not going to increase with legalization of marijuana. In fact, it's probably going to go down because the people who are doing it legally are going to find every possible way they can, just like every other farmer, like Chris, to use their water as efficiently as possible. So I think we should, we can't stop it. I think we should welcome the Cannabis Alliance and everyone who wants to go legitimate, with open arms and do everything we can to work with them.
Thank you. Mr. Beerwagen.
So I am aware that the manager made that claim. I'm not aware of the facts behind it or why anything to do with, because I've not been interested or followed the watering of marijuana. I do know that it's been stated recently that it doesn't actually use very much water in Nevada County, relatively speaking. I don't know what the numbers are, and it's probably going to be hard to quantify. So I'm not aware of, unless he was proposing a raw water hookup versus using treated water. I don't know the reasoning behind that or any discussion about that. So I couldn't speak to it.
Thank you. And given the timing and the fact that I've covered most of the questions that were handed up to me, I think let's go to the closing.
Okay.
And so, Mr. Beerwagen, you get to first close.
Okay. First off, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here tonight, for providing this opportunity to hear what we have to say. And I'd also like to thank all of you for coming here tonight and listening to our goals and our ideas and our what we think should be the future of NID. As a lifelong resident, I think of Nevada County and agriculturists, I think that I can best represent the district, having had my agricultural background and leadership things going on. Recognizing that ag uses the bulk of the water, it's been stated. In California, it's 80% of the developed water, not 80% of the water that falls out of the sky, and I think that's an important distinction. But because ag does use the bulk of the water, doesn't mean that I don't believe that the other uses are not important, and they are important, including all of the domestic, industrial, and environmental protections that we desire. It will be my goal to ensure that the district does these things, and my personal commitment to you to be involved and engaged in ensuring that all users are satisfied. I believe that my leadership experiences have qualified me to serve as a policymaker on the board. I served 6 years in the U.S. Navy, 20 years on the fire department. At 4 of those, I was the chief. I was on the boards and was president of the Nevada County Growers Market and Farm Bureau. I participated in the California Farm Bureau Leadership Farm Bureau year-long training program. I am convinced that my knowledge of how NID works, my lifetime use of water as an agricultural producer, combined with my leadership experiences and community service, qualifies me to be the best candidate for the position. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Herring.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for doing this. You might have had the hardest job, I don't know. And thanks to the League of Women Voters. And I also want to thank each of you for coming out. We're all busy, and you came out here tonight to try to make an informed decision. I have the greatest respect for Chris Bierwagen and the agricultural heritage that his family represents. By his own admission, Mr. Bierwagen represents the status quo. I represent the future and moving forward. And I also represent sound fiscal management. As we have seen, we didn't really get into this, but there's about to be at least an 8% annual across-the-board rate increase, exacerbated by spending $13 million on a project that may or may not ever happen. This is the very definition of fiscal irresponsibility. So we have a clear choice, in my view here. We can either go forward or we can stand still. And so I'd like to go forward and explore all the possibilities that we possibly can. We haven't even dreamed of some of them yet, and how best to ensure the long-term viability of our water supply and the quality of our water and just our way of life right here in Nevada County. So thank you, and I ask for your support.
Thank you. And now we can all give some appreciation to these two gentlemen for their commitment to the community and their willingness to serve. And so next Wednesday night, Grass Valley City Hall for the City Council. Next Thursday night here for the Sheriff's Department.
As far as I know. It's the worst part.
I'm going to just end with one more thing, which is just to tell you that our ballots are going to be dropping in the beginning of October. So we really need to understand what's on our ballot. You can do that if you go to the League of Women Voters website, www.lwvwnc.org, League of Women Voters of Western Nevada County. It's one-stop shopping to register to vote, check your registration status, look at your ballot, consider the pros and cons. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you very much.